Students, colleagues, guests, on behalf of the Centre for Entrepreneurship at Aberdeen Business School, a very warm welcome to the 2015 Entrepreneurship Lecture. For the benefit of guests who are here and for anyone who's not familiar with this particular lecture theatre, just some safety announcements to begin with. I'm told that there are no scheduled testings going on of the fire alarms during this event this afternoon, so if the fire alarm does sound, then please leave immediately via the nearest available exits. Those are at the doors at the bottom here in this lecture theatre, and if you could then make your way to the muster points outside the main entrance and in the car park next to the sports centre. If first aid assistance is required, can you please contact the reception desk up in the main atrium, please. So, with that put to one side, as I look at today's programme of activities, I can imagine that there are going to be many themes and aspects of enterprise and entrepreneurship that will be highlighted, considered, chewed over, discussed, debated, and so on. And one theme that strikes me from the activities that we have in front of us this afternoon that is likely to emerge is that of enabling. Our guest speaker, our guest entrepreneur, Duncan Skinner, is going to tell us the story of his entrepreneurial journey. It's a journey that was kick-started really in 2006 when he and his business partner, Bob Keeler, borrowed $300 million to buy PSN from Halliburton subsidiary KPR. They then sold that for $1 billion to Wood Group in 2011. That entrepreneurial activity not only reaped substantial rewards for the investors, but it also enabled Duncan to devote his time, his energy, his enthusiasm, and all his other resources to helping others. For example, in 2009, Duncan stepped in to help rescue Glencraft from closure and to enable it to be transformed into a successful and sustainable social enterprise. He also became chairman of Aberdeen Football Club Community Trust, and he serves on a number of other charitable boards and trusts across Scotland. Duncan has been recognised for his substantial work in a number of different ways, including quite recently through the Ernst & Young Social Entrepreneur of the Year 2013. A special link that we have here with Duncan and that we would like to recognise today in this event is that he has a degree in management from RGU, and I suspect we might hear a little bit about some of his time here at RGU during his talk today. And as the business school here at RGU celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, we were particularly delighted that we could have a former student come back as our guest entrepreneur today. This is the 19th annual Entrepreneurship Lecture, and it's the generous sponsorship year on year by Ian Mickey from Absoft that makes this event possible. But Ian does much more than just sponsor this event. By participating actively in this event, he enables us year on year to gain insights into his own business, into Absoft, and to understand the achievements and the challenges that have taken place and have occurred along his entrepreneurial journey. Having heard Ian speak about Absoft each year for the last few years, I'm beginning to think of his business as a bit like a jigsaw, where each year Ian takes out one piece and examines it with us and discusses it and reflects on it. And it's a rare privilege, actually. Alistair Anderson and I, my colleague, were discussing this yesterday. It's a rare privilege to have access to an entrepreneur who is prepared to come and do that year by year and to be so open and candid about his own entrepreneurial journey. And I know from the discussions that take place in the classrooms around the campus after this event each year, Ian's comments, his reflections and his thoughts are incredibly thought-provoking and give us lots of scope for debate and discussion. So Ian and Duncan, we're very grateful to both of you for coming here and speaking with us today. After the presentations today, there will be time for questions here in the lecture theatre. Then lunch will be served in the atrium outside. And over lunch, there will be an opportunity to talk further with our guest speakers and also to visit some of the exhibition stands that are out there, including the stand from Absoft, the Converge Challenge, and from SIE. Also, over lunch, we are delighted that colleagues from the Converge Challenge are here today and that they're giving us an exclusive pre-launch of the challenge for 2015. Veronica and your colleagues, we're really grateful to you for coming along to do that, and we look forward to hearing more about that over lunch. But as you can see from our schedule today, things don't stop at lunch and don't stop after lunch. For students who would like to talk further with our guest speakers, there's an opportunity at 2:30 up in room 608 to 609 to have a roundtable informal discussion with our speakers, perhaps to share your own business and enterprise ideas if you would like to, perhaps get some advice, and perhaps to hear a little bit more about their own journeys and their plans for the future as well. And then a little bit later on in the afternoon, we have a presentation from First Port, who will be talking about some of the support that they can offer to students and others wishing to set up their own social enterprises. And then at 16:15, it's back to Converge Challenge presenters who are going to give us a brief presentation and an interactive workshop if you would like to attend on entrepreneurial ecosystems, pitching, coming up with enterprising ideas, and all sorts of other activities I know they have planned for us later this afternoon. So please, students who are here, feel free to join in any of those activities during the afternoon. But let's turn now to our guest speakers, and we'll start with Ian Mickey from Absoft. Ian, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, as Helen said, I'm Ian Mickey, Managing Director of Absoft. We are an Aberdeen-based software consultancy. We've been around for almost 25 years now. We focus exclusively on something called SAP, which is the business system that most of the global operators run their business on. And our role in that is largely about helping them to adapt to change, improve their business processes, introduce new things, etc. More or less continuous improvement. Sorry. Do I need to start again, or can I carry on? Carry on. Good. I say our business is really about working with our customers to improve things and adapt to change, and of course the period that the oil industry is going into just now is going to be a big period of change. We've got about 80 people at the moment. Just wanted to highlight that we've, over the years, particularly the last few years, we've employed and given people, graduates, many from this university, a chance to start out in their working life. Being part of oil and gas industry, I wouldn't say we're a truly global country, but we've been around about 40 countries in the world. I think I've personally been about 13 of them working. And I say basically we're about helping companies achieve more from their IT systems. Now, over the last few years, there's maybe a slightly different makeup to the audience today, but over the last few years I've been struck how often our guest lecturers have talked about the importance of their company values to the businesses that they've built up. Roy McGregor was passionate about that when he was talking about global energy. Adele Harris from Cornerstone and Ken Milroy from Foyer both had a big play on it, as did Linda Bruce Gardine of Genius, the gluten-free food manufacturer. Many years ago, when I had the misfortune of starting out as a law student, one of the first things I was taught is that a company is a legal person. It's a little strange concept, but actually, in some senses, you can see it playing out beyond the legal context into companies definitely have personalities. They've got a business brand, they've got objectives, and they've got a business plan. But I think they've also, part of their internal glue is personality and the values that bind the whole organisation together. So I'm not going to go through all Absoft's values. I'm going to talk about 3 corporate values that we have, and then just say a little bit more about 3 more personal ones. So the first one in our business is people. We deliver, the services that we deliver are very much specific to the customer we're delivering them to. So we're very much a people business. We don't have standard things that we take off the shelf and go and do. So for most people join Absoft, we hire them because we think they're very good people, and normally they bring very good skills to us, but it's unusual to take somebody who's an absolute finished article. So we as a business try to invest continuously, if we can, if economics allow it, in our people. Now that can be further technical training to expand the area of activities they can take part in, but equally importantly, it can often be the softer skills, from things like how to write an effective report to how to run a workshop that actually delivers some outcomes at the end rather than is a good conversation for an hour. How to change people, because if you're introducing new things into an organisation, changing the people is big part of the job. And sometimes how to say no without losing the contract, upsetting the customer, etc., etc. But no is definitely a word that needs to be used. So hopefully, as people join Absoft and stay with us throughout the years, we invest in both their technical and softer skills, and hopefully they get from that opportunities to grow personally, both in their technical skill but also their consulting capabilities. The second one I put up there is customer service. Now, I guess lots of companies would say customer service in some ways or shape is part of their corporate value. For us, it's the world we operate in is, although it's with global companies, it's a relatively small world. Reputation is key. And so we've got an ethos of trying to deliver, on all occasions, quality, service and value to our customers. And our ambition, and these things can be trite, but it is an ambition, is that we want every customer to be capable of recommending us to their peers. Now, saying quality, service and value are very important, and that's what everybody's trying to do. That's fine, but it's actually quite hard to deliver. You know, if you go to, as I went once to driving on the west coast of the States, and because I was with my whole family, we were just passing through a town. We booked into Holiday Inn Express, and I knew exactly what I was buying with a Holiday Inn Express. But of course, it's an American guy at reception in the morning when I'm checking out, and he said to me something like, "Was everything great for you?" And my kids had just been mumping about the poor quality of the muffins at breakfast. So I said, "Well, actually, no, it wasn't great, but it was okay, it was good." And he said, "Why wasn't it great?" And I said, "Well, you know, I'm not actually paying for great, I'm paying for good, etc., etc." And then we get into the details of what was wrong with my kids' muffins and all this sort of stuff. But it's the same when we sell services to people, to customers. It's really important that we actually deliver what we say. That we don't under-deliver, that's obvious. But actually, over-delivery can damage a customer relationship severely, because if you over-deliver, it's going to be at the cost of time and it's going to be at the cost of money. And the likelihood is you'll have done a great job with your mate you're actually delivering to, but you'll seriously have pissed off the manager who's paying for it. So it's easy to speak about, not always easy to deliver. The second reason up there, every customer recommending us, periodically I analyse where all our business has come from. And the majority, whatever stage we're at, the majority always comes from references. From a partner, from another customer, from somebody who worked at a customer who now works somewhere else and wants to take us in, etc., etc. Reputation is so important. And it's becoming probably, in a wider sense, more important. How often before you book a restaurant do you go onto a comparison site and see what people say? Or do you do TripAdvisor before you go and stay in a hotel, etc., etc.? So reputation is really important, but it's actually really important for getting new business as well. The last point I've got here is partnership. Because our business is built around delivering services which are particular to a customer, when we engage with customers, we talk to them very early on about trying to build a partnership with them. So we're not there just to deliver this first project, make a bit of money, get out and go on to the next place. We try and work with customers to look at longer term issues and how we can work with them over time to their benefit and obviously to ours. And over the years, I think that has paid off. As you're all aware, the oil price has dropped hugely in the last few months, and you know that's for us led to some interesting meetings that I've had to attend about price cutting and cost saving, etc., etc. But I think the thing that is sustaining us largely at the moment is the fact that we have built these partnerships with our customers over the years. So they know us and they trust us, and although they're taking some pain and we're taking some pain, I think because of the relationship that's been built up, they can see us helping them through the next 2 or 3 years and improving processes and making cost savings together. So I think partnership, it's always been our aim, but I think at this particular point in the oil industry, it's something we're positively benefiting from. Just a few words about some more personal things. And these are, I'm certainly not claiming that they are something, some of them are Absoft values, but things that I value particularly. Transparency is the first one. Again, we're a medium-sized company, which means, broadly speaking, we know everybody who works in the company. We work in an open plan office structure. There's obviously things that cannot be transparent, largely HR matters and people issues. But most of the other things about our business, I like to think that we are open to the staff, so the staff know what's happening and they get explanations for what's happened and why. And that to me builds a more open, trusting environment. I know there are companies who, external people come in and look at us and they're absolutely appalled at some of the stuff that we share as employees in the company. And maybe it's just me, because I can't imagine a different way of doing it. But I think it does engender trust, and it sometimes takes a couple of years for people to come in and truly adjust to it, but I think once they do, it works well. Second one I've got there is integrity. Now, I'm certainly not standing up here as a paragon of integrity. And when I was a lot younger than I am just now, there's 2 incidents in the football park I remember very well, which prove I'm not a man of integrity. First one was I was playing a match and the opponent behind me told me to leave the ball, and I left it. And of course, then I found out it was an opponent, so I was red rage for about 10 minutes. And next time I tackled him, I think for the only time in my life, I deliberately left my foot in after I'd got the ball. I didn't get the ball first, but I left my foot there too. And then the red mist disappeared. And the second one was the traditional, in our school anyway, we used to play the teachers at the end of 6th year. Always an interesting occasion. And I scored, one of the goals I scored, it was a kind of ball bouncing between me and the keeper, and I had the opportunity to use my fist to put the ball into the net, and the keeper knew I'd done it. So I had a classic dilemma. Do I tell the referee, yes, I handled the ball? Or do I figure the referee's here to do his job? If he saw it, he gives it. If he doesn't, it's a goal. So I took the latter course, being a man of complete integrity. But I think it's something you don't want to preach about either. I think it's about what you do. And you'll be challenged. There are many situations. A couple of other small stories. When we first worked in the Middle East, they've got an arrangement there in the country we worked in where you always had to channel your work through an agency, a local agency. We had to pay, well, 3% of our fee went to this local agency, and you kind of think, what happens to that 3%? Now, when a country is starting up, you can imagine this is a way of filtering some funds from companies to there. But I don't know what happened to the 3%, and I've absolutely no desire to ask about it. But worse than the 3%, which felt like a tax for somebody doing nothing, was that after a few weeks working, we delivered some stuff and they wanted to buy our services for more, and they still hadn't paid an invoice. Or a series of invoices when it came down to it. And this carried on for a bit, and it became clear that they weren't paying the invoice because somebody was expecting somebody from Absoft to help the invoice be paid, shall we say. So we just stood our ground, actually, and we fortunately we at the time had the opportunity to sell some services elsewhere, and as things turned out, we worked in both places, but they paid the invoice, but they didn't get the services they were hoping to get because of that. And for me, that is a bit of an issue for principle, even, and I accept there are different cultural environments, but there are some points. Story against myself again, though. In Mauritania, I was leaving after a 2-day visit. It's a very poor country in the west coast of Africa, and we were driven to the airport, arrived at the airport, driver came in with us. He asked for my passport and my papers, and I thought, well, it's a bit odd, but I gave it to him. And he then sought out this other guy who took them away. And about 10 minutes later, he comes back, and he gives them to me personally. And that's me just going through customs and immigration, etc., etc. And then he said, "Un petit cadeau," a little present. I'd been oblivious. I didn't even know why my passport was away in the first place, and so I gave him €5 because that was clearly he'd done some kind of service for this. But and I say I wasn't particularly conscious of all the things that were happening. So was I paying somebody to do something they shouldn't have been doing, even if it was only €5? It's something that I don't think there's not clear boundaries often. You can go either way, and it's your personal sense. But I think one key thing that I do see, which one of the other, Pete Henderson, the MD of PISIS, blogged on this recently, and he was talking about how you talk to your customers about your competitors. And I think this is an issue where integrity is really important. I think bad-mouthing the competition to your customers and prospects is a disastrous thing to do. Even if they laugh about it, etc., etc. at the time. It's really important that you respect. Business is tough, we're out there to fight, we're out there to compete, but we've got to have respect for each other as well. And you know, there's a couple of times we've lost deals where our competitors have gone along and said, you don't want to buy from Absoft because they're just about to be bought over. And we've lost the deals, customers never came to us and told us till afterwards. The irony of it is the companies that say it are usually the ones that are getting bought out, and 3 months later they've gone. So it is a personal thing, but I think it's something that if you're a business leader, your staff observe about you, and I think it's really important that as a leader you hold some personal integrity really importantly. And the last thing, I've maybe been getting on several hobby horses to date, but this is a real hobby horse. Fiscal responsibility, both personal and corporate. The way that some companies are set up, particularly, you know, the European Union seems to be particularly open to it just now, where people actually do their business in one country and they pay tax in another at a fraction of the cost that they would do if they'd been working paying in the country they're actually doing business in. So Absoft and myself personally have always been, this has been really important to us, and it's not about meeting the legal requirements for tax, corporate and personal. I would say it's a moral issue. You know, we could all do whatever we do. I could pay my accountants, my lawyers far more than I already pay them, and that's quite a lot, to avoid both corporate and personal tax. But, you know, this university, to a large extent over the years, has been a product of corporate and personal tax. We live in an interdependent world. So it just seems to me that it's a basic about operating the business world, that where you do business, you pay your dues and you give back in that way to the society that surrounds you. So for me, I know what Amazon do, etc., is legal, but it's not. For me, it's not a way to do business effectively. So I'll get off my hobby horse now. That's the end of that. I'm going to hand over now to Duncan, who it's a great pleasure for Duncan to come and speak to us today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Enough of this business, let's talk about golf. This is Hector, the head cover. This is my trusty 3-wood, and I'm a passionate golfer. This is one of the most famous views in golf. You know, there won't be too many of you familiar with the detail of the game of golf, but most of you should be familiar with this picture. It's a picture of the first and the 18th fairways of the Old Course at St Andrews. The building on the left is the home of the Royal and Ancient that I'm glad to say just admitted its first female members yesterday, including Princess Anne, Princess Royal. This is Hamilton Hall. It used to be the students' halls of residence at St Andrews, and is now, I think, been converted into flats. You can buy them for $2 or $3 million a pop. Anyway, I want to talk about golf. My first time I played St Andrews, played the Old Course, and I was a very keen golfer, and I went down with some friends, and very, very excited. It is one of the oldest courses in the world and one of the finest. And we tracked up, we got our tee time, and 4 of us went round, and I was just absolutely in awe playing this old links, playing all these holes that I'd seen on television, seen all my heroes playing on. And I played okay, and you know, I'd paid the money just to play the road hole, the 17th, and the 18th, which is the green here, and about 200 people watching, and very, very nervously I holed out. In fact, the green is so big, I think I lost my marker on it. But it was just an awesome experience. I think I knocked it round at about 84, which wasn't too bad for me. Some years later, when I'd moved on a little in my career, I was at the stage where entertaining customers was part of my job. And I was lucky enough to go down to St Andrews with 2 customers and a colleague, and we were allowed to have caddies. Wow, this is different. Actually having a caddy, somebody to carry your bag, was good for a start. So I actually hit the 3-wood off the first, knocked it down the middle. It's probably one of the widest fairways in world golf, so you can hardly miss it. But I did hit it down the middle. And the caddy, having watched me hit one shot, handed me, I said, "Kind of a wedge?" And he says, "No, it's a 9-iron, sir." I said, "You sure?" He says, "Yes, sir." So I took the 9-iron and hit the ball towards the hole, and the ball landed 6 feet from the hole. That was good. If I'd hit a wedge, it would have been in this burn here called the Swilkin Burn. So that was a good start. And then I lined up a putt, and caddy says, what do you see, son? I says, it's just dead straight. No, 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 aim 2 inches to the right. So I did, hold it. Hey, 1 under par on the old course at St Andrews. Fantastic. So on the second tee, and you could see the flag straight down the middle. And he said, aim at that spire over on the left there, sir. I thought, this guy's off his head. But took the driver out and nailed it towards this church spire in the distance. And ended up with a fantastic line in to the flag. And popped it onto the green, 2-putted for a par. And so we went on, and this guy took me on an amazing journey around this golf course that I'd played before. And he played it, he showed me how to play it properly, because this was his job. And I ended up, I hold a birdie putt in the 9th to get out in 2 under par. I hold another birdie putt on the 12th, and then I got a bit shaky. And thought, this is way out of my comfort zone, 3 under par on the old course. I dropped a few shots coming back, but I knocked it round in 73, which is 2 over par, and I was absolutely thrilled. And you know what? It was all down to that caddy. Because this guy, who must have been in his 60s, carrying my bag, and I thought that's what caddies did, he showed me the way. He showed me what he knew. He passed on his knowledge to me. I think it cost about £25, but it was a great £25 spent, because I can now say I've been around the old course in 73. And the Open Championships there this year, and you'll see professionals knock it round in much higher than 73. So I'll be able to say, I'm better than them. Many years ago. Anyway, the point of that little story, the point of having Hector the head cover and the 3-wood, is really about having a mentor, looking at people who have more experience than you do, to guide you along the way, and the power that that has. And you know, mentors for me, my parents. My parents are fantastic people, good people, taught me good habits, taught me the difference between right and wrong. That's mentorship in some respects. Other people I've worked with, some were peers and some were mentors, but Heather mentioned Bob Keeler. We worked together. But we mentored each other, because it can get quite lonely at the top of a company when you've got nobody to turn to, so you bounce ideas off each other. But also we had a chairman, Charles Mackay, who looks after the historic and royal palaces, stays in Kensington Palace, and he came on as our chairman, and he mentored us both, because he'd been through the journey, or a similar journey to the one that Bob and I were undertaking, and he gave us advice and guidance. Heather mentioned us buying the PSN story. You know, when we started that, first thing Bob did was he called up Tom Farmer, Tom Hunter, and Bill Gamble, titans of Scottish industry, and he just said, "Look, I'm Bob Keeler. Just bought a pretty big business in Aberdeen. I haven't done this before. Can you spare an hour?" And each one of them spent half a day with Bob and passed on knowledge to them. So today, I mentor 6 people. Don't do any more than 6, because it is quite time consuming, but glad to do it. And glad to say Bob does the same, and he's mentored a lot of people, including Roy McGregor, who we passed on 4 values to. So that's mentorship. My name is Duncan Skinner. I'm a retired Chief Financial Officer of Wood Group PSN. Spent 35 years in business, in the oil and gas business. It's the place I wanted to be. Before I even came to this university, I wanted to work in oil and gas. It was just kicking off at that time in 1975, but it was already dynamic and vibrant enough for me to know I wanted a career in oil and gas. And I came here to do a business degree because I didn't know what I wanted to do in working in oil and gas. I certainly have no engineering capability. So I did the sandwich degree. This is my journey in logos. My year out in the sandwich degree was at a place called Lewis Offshore up in the Isle of Lewis in the Western Isles, at a heavy steel fabrication yard called Lewis Offshore, owned by Fred Olsen. There I did a study called Job Costing and Labour Distribution in the Heavy Steel Fabrication Industry. And I'll never forget it. We actually had a pretty massive workforce there, building jackets and heavy steel items for the oil and gas industry, and very much a trades labour force. They punched in, they clocked in, but they didn't do any job costing. So I invented this system, and we delivered it. And we delivered it using punch cards, which were a product of the timekeeping system. People clocked in and clocked out. And we had these punch cards that we gathered at the end of the day, at the end of the week. We put them all together, parcelled them up, and posted them to Fred Olsen in Dundee, who owned Timex. Same people as made the watches, but they had a computer, a very large computer, probably fill half the size of this room. And this computer would take these cards and process them and send back, they would send back the cards and this A3 size green stripy paper with typed up labour cost analysis and distribution, and this happened weekly. Now, today, that happens in the blink of an eye. Ian's business and SAP and ERP systems will have not just job costing, they'll pay the guy, they'll invoice the client, they'll reorder materials, they'll have a job costing system, and they'll do the accounts automatically, an ERP system. Whereas this took a week just to get some information back. I moved on I joined Brown and Root after graduating, spent 2 years there, and I left the business for the only time in my life in 1981 and joined another Fred Olsen company called AOC International. In 1993, a guy called Doug Dukic, who's the MD of Enermec and another mentor of mine and great friend, Doug and I became the two executives joining Brown and Root and AOC together to create the imaginatively titled Brown and Root AOC joint venture. So at that time we had one project from Brown and Root and AOC in that. 3 years later we had every single piece of business that Brown and Root and AOC did in operations and maintenance and design in the Northeast in our company. And in 1995, Halliburton decided to buy the AOC share because they already owned Brown and Root, so we became part of the Halliburton group. In 1997, Halliburton bought the Kellogg Group and created Kellogg KBR, which was Kellogg Brown and Root. In 2004, Bob Keeler and I had the idea, because Kellogg Brown and Root didn't really understand what we did with our 6,000 people based out of Aberdeen in what we called production services, Brown and Root production services. So we had the idea to buy the business, and as Heather said, we borrowed the small sum of $300 million and bought 6,000 people, 60 contracts, and an office block in Dice, some IT kit, and started with a £2 off-the-shelf company, Production Services Network, or PSN as it was known. That was quite an adventure. Still haven't told my wife that we put everything on the line, including the house, so keep that quiet, please. But it seemed to work quite well, and 5 years later, having come through the financial crisis and having weathered $40 oil, during which time we'd grown the profits of the business 25% year on year, because we told Goldman Sachs that we could, and we did. We received an offer from Wood Group that we couldn't really refuse, and I thought particularly the challenge of merging two great Aberdeen companies, this young upstart called PSN and the Titanic Wood Group led by Sir Ian Wood. I thought merging these two Aberdeen businesses together to create the biggest operations and maintenance engineering construction company in the world with 1 billion man-hours of experience. I thought that was a great idea and a really good challenge. And they wanted Bob to assume the role of CEO of Wood Group eventually. So we merged our 9,000 people at that point with Wood Group's 19,000 and became 28,000 in Wood Group PSN. And today Wood Group is 43,000 people and it's headed up by Bob. At that point I decided, I've done a couple of years with Wood Group, it's been a blast, really enjoyed it, but I've got other things I want to do. So I got out. The purpose of this, telling you about this journey, and going back to the story I told about Lewis Offshore, is change. The amount of change that I've seen in that journey, which I've taken a few minutes to run you through, is phenomenal. I was looking today, does anyone know what this is? A laptop. This is my first personal computer. I'll hand it round. Be very careful. I don't know if you're strong enough to hold this. You can pass it round. That's not that old. If you open it up, it says Intel inside, and it's made by Toshiba. And we used to plug that in. This was for me working at home because I used to work 3,000 hours a year, which is probably 1,200 more than the 37.5 hours a week you guys will be looking to do. So I worked quite hard, and I would take my work home, and I would plug in, much to my family's disgust, take the phone out of the socket, plug this into the phone socket, and dial up automatically, and you'd get this hissing noise, and it would ring, and I'd get through to the network, so as I could use my spreadsheets and get a little bit of a download from the mainframe system. Email, I don't think, was on that thing. I don't think it was invented at the time. The point is, the change today, you know, I don't have my phone on me, but my phone does all that stuff. You don't need these things anymore. The change is quite incredible. And, you know, the change that I've seen throughout this 34 years, 35 years, is quite incredible. And the point of change that I want to get across to you is that you should never say that can't be done. You know, this year, 2015 is 1st of December 2015. It'll be 60 years since a wonderful lady called Rosa Parks sat in a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. And she sat in the seats that were reserved for coloreds, and the seats reserved for whites was full. And the bus driver came along and asked her to get off the bus because she had to give her seat up for the white people, and she refused. And she was arrested because she refused. Now, 60 years later, to have Barack Obama as president and basic leader of the Western world is incredible. It's a great story. 60 years is all it's taken. So I would urge you, talking about change, is never say never. Never say you can't do that. Look for ways that you can. And just look at examples of that to take you on your way. When we closed the deal at PSN, with a wonderful lawyer called Doug Crawford, and he explained after the deal was closed that it was probably the most complex deal in Scottish legal history, because it was an asset purchase deal, and we were basically just buying promises from our customers to come and work with us, promises for existing staff to come and work with us, and buying a few assets for $300 million. And Doug, we sat in Johnson House in Rose Street in McGregor's offices at that time, and Doug, it was like conducting an orchestra. He sat with his BlackBerry and was in contact with Australia, the west coast of the United States, Houston, eastern seaboard of Canada, Africa, London, and various places throughout Scotland on his BlackBerry, ordering stuff around, getting paper fax, not fax, but scanned in, getting documents all over the world, coming into this one room in Aberdeen to get this deal done. And I just sat and reflected, 100 years ago, a deal like this would have taken years to complete with an ink pen and a quill. But use of technology changes the way that you can do things. So I guess my message is embrace change, look for opportunity. At $40 oil, there's lots of opportunity. There's opportunities to change, to do things different, to do things better. It hurts at the time when you lose your job. It hurts to tell people they're going to lose their jobs, but it can sometimes be a catalyst to enthuse and to make things better. And that's what this oil and gas industry in Aberdeen needs, is we kick up the backside from time to time. And it can be brutal in certain areas, but it can be the catalyst for opportunity in others. The PSN story is, I could stand here all afternoon and tell stories about PSN, but one of the things that we didn't mean at the time, and Ian touched on his core values, his personal core values, and his corporate core values, but we at the time, Bob and I took 5 other directors with us and 2 other executives to form a team of 9 of us that were the management team at PSN. We stuck together right through the whole 5 years, no change, very little politics going on. We all liked each other, we all were good at what we did, and we all worked well together to build the business. By the way, we doubled the turnover of the business in 5 years, and we trebled the bottom line from, I think it was $33 million per annum we made when we bought it. And when we sold it to Wood Group, the year we sold it to Wood Group, we made $120 million. So they got a bargain. Bob said to us, we had 200 years of experience in the oil and gas industry between the 9 of us. So there was a bit of grey hair around, and a bit of experience, and some of us had been mentored, etc. But Bob said, okay, we've just come out of Halliburton, and Halliburton, KBR at that time was supplying troop support to Bosnia, to Afghanistan, and to the Middle East, the Iraq conflict. Hundreds and hundreds of people supporting 50,000 American troops in these 3 war zones. Takes a lot of looking after, it's a lot of mouths to feed, it's a lot of latrines to dig, it's a lot of camps to establish, and KBR are very, very good at it. They're the best in the world at doing that kind of stuff, and it has to be done. But one of the core values of KBR was safety. 64 people in KBR didn't come home, or they came home in body bags because they'd been killed in the front line in supporting these troops. And that really didn't sit with us. If you're going to have a core value, it needs to be core. And that type of activity, well, you either don't have it as a core value and you have it as a consequence of being in that business, or you look after them better, but it was unacceptable to us. So we were cognizant of that. The other thing was Halliburton changed their core values annually, which kind of puzzled us a little bit. So Bob said, like, what do we stand for? What are we about? So we thought, well, we'll rent an office, a meeting room somewhere in town, and we'll go off and we'll create our core values. So we did that, trucked up on a Monday morning, said, right, we'll get this done by lunchtime, and we did get it done by lunchtime, by Friday lunchtime. 4.5 days it took us to distill the initial 50 core values that we thought we had down to 7. And these are the 7 core values. I don't know if you can read them, but these were our core values. And it became, we marketed the core values very well. If you joined PSN, you get a little pamphlet saying, joining the network. tiny little book, but what it went through was the 7 core values and the expected behaviours of somebody joining PSN. Senior management got a little book called Managing the Network, the expected behaviours of the managers, the senior 60 managers in PSN, and how we expected them to behave as managers. And everything was colour-coded. It's Bob's idea. He's a bit of an artist, and he used some pretty clever pre-Raphaelite use of colour where these things mean something. But we ended up with 7 colours to help people remember. And I mean, I know that red is financial responsibility, orange is people, blue is relationships, green is social responsibility, dark blue is health and safety, and the one I've missed is integrity, which is brown. So we know about the colours help people remember. So it was a nice little tool to help them remember. We had the 7 core values. By the way, financial responsibility in PSN was a bit greater than Wood Group. And we only had 2 colours, orange and blue, because I've saved them stationary. But we did have the 7 blocks, and they do mean something. The orange is the people core values, the heart of the business, and the blue, the dark blue, is underlining, underpinning everything was health and safety. So we set off designing these core values, and then we put them out to the business, tested them, and tweaked them, and got the 60 management to buy, to put their views in, and eventually crafted them and got going with them. And we didn't actually realise what we started, but we were sitting one of our early meetings, and I already told you we got these 60 contracts novated, given to us by our customers, and that allowed us to trade. And it was very, very difficult. We had to go and visit every single customer and say, look, we're a startup, we've got a £2 off-the-shelf company, we've got a $100 million a year contract with you, please trust us, come with us. And fortunately they all did. Fortunately all the staff did too. We had 1 person left. Sally went off to join Halliburton in the Middle East. I think she fancied a tour in Dubai. She looked after real estate, so she was the only person that left. But at one of our early management meetings, we had a chap called Alan Gordon had phoned up and told Jerome Lynch, our international director, and said, we've got a real problem with one of our customers in Singapore. They're inherently unsafe. They do not do things that give us any confidence that they know the first thing about safety, and our people are in peril, and they want to know what to do. And we looked at each other around the table and thought, my goodness, this is a real test. And somebody said, well, it's obvious what we need to do. We need to give the contract back and tell the client we don't want to work with them. And everyone, all 9 of us around the table, said, yeah. And the hairs on the back of my neck went up, and I thought, wow, this is different. This is really different. We're prepared to give a multi-million-dollar contract up because of safety, and that's really meaning. So that became a real core value for us. And things progressed. You know, we made some pretty big decisions. We found out that our bankers had made a decision. If ever you get the chance to work with the world of corporate finance, especially in the City of London, you'll find a totally different breed of character. These guys are ruthless, absolutely ruthless. It's great when things are great, but when things go wrong, oh my goodness, these guys die for cover and they take no prisoners. So things had started, the value of the business had diminished along with all the other oil and gas companies at $40 oil. So everything had been floating around nicely. We got a call from one of our investors who said, by the way, we've noticed this clause in one of the banking documents that if you exit at a particular price, sell the business, it disadvantages us to the tune of 35 million. It's a pretty complex formula in this exit valuation. And they said the bankers have made a mistake here. What are you going to do about it? Now, if the boot had been on the other foot, they would have said, tough, you signed that, we can't change it. Because that did happen. But I went off, researched it, and came back and said, Bob, the bankers have made a mistake here. It is an error. I've researched it, custom and practice in this industry for a deal like this. There's a mistake in that formula. How much does it could it cost us? He said it could cost us £35 million. And we looked at each other and said, okay, tell them we'll change the clause. So we went back and said, okay, we agree. Now that could have cost us £35 million, but it was the right thing to do. And again, it was a good demonstration of our core values. Bob went to Chad. There was a civil war which is breaking out. Civil war is the president's cousin from time to time gets up a band of mercenaries and tries to overthrow his cousin in Jamena, and it gets pretty nasty. So we had a base producing oil and gas in the middle of Chad, way out in the outback, and we employed hundreds of Chadians. And of course they got very, very antsy and very worried about the civil war, they lived on site, and we recognised this, so we just shut down and said, guys, here's £100 each, go back to your families, go back to your homes, look after them, be safe, and when everything's over, do come back. They were absolutely gobsmacked by this gesture. And the next time Bob went out, they actually made him an honorary chief. And there's some fantastic photographs of Bob in traditional Chadian gear, the hat on and things. And what they wouldn't do for PSN after that is hardly worth speaking about. So sometimes you make decisions against yourself, but it's the right thing to do. Final one, Ian talked about corruption. We had a job that we'd spent $300,000 bidding to an Austrian company for a job in Tunisia. We got to the semi-final, or the final really, there's 2 companies left, and we're just about over the line with it, worked really hard, and our guys were told, we're going to give this job to you, but we will need, you will look after us. And our guy says, what do you mean? Well, you'll look after us. And I said, expand. And I said, we'll need a payment in order to give you this contract. How much? 5%. You have to be kidding. We don't do that thing. And so they phoned Jerome, and Jerome says, did you tell them about your core values? And they said, yes, we did. So we left, went back to another meeting, and again they asked, and Jerome, we just said, right, we're out. They left the meeting, they phoned Jerome, Jerome phoned the guys in Austria and said, we've just spent $300,000 bidding, produced a great proposal, worked for 6 months to get this job, we just want to tell you, you can keep it. We don't want it, your people are trying to bribe us, we don't work. Whether it's £1 or £300,000, we don't give bribes. So they thanked us for that and said cheerio, we thought nothing more of it, other than licked our wounds. They phoned us 2 days later, awarded us the contract, and informed us that they'd sacked their entire commercial team in Tunisia. So sometimes things do work out well for you. So these were our core values. Now, my message here is have your own core values. Define what you stand for as a person. Ian talked about transparency, integrity, and fiscal responsibility. These things are dear to him, they're dear to me too. That's why I live in Aberdeen and not Monaco. But it gives me a voice in my community. I don't truck with the Sean Connerys of this world who suddenly become experts in Scottish politics from the Grand Cayman Islands or whatever. Pay your dues, pay your dues. But these are Ian's personal core values. He's got corporate core values. Take some time early in your career to define yourselves, to tell yourselves what you stand for. We had people queuing up to join PSN because it was a great place to be, because it had values, because we did things right, and because we did the right things. Heather mentioned Glencraft. We've taken these values into Glencraft, a small factory of 46 people. These people have got core values instilled in them, exactly the same as the 43,000 now in Woodgroup. These have core values. So have your own personal ones, and check when you go for interviews what the values of the companies are. Make sure it's not just lip service. Make sure they're deep. The hairs in the back of your neck go up. And so, I mentioned Glencraft. The next phase in my journey was around social enterprise. One of our core values was social responsibility, and Bob and I did lots in the community. I was the chair of Scottish Council for Development and Industry in the North East, chair of OCA, Oil and Gas UK. We did things in the community, we networked, and we tried to give something back wherever we worked in the community as PSN. And one of the sorriest stories was in November 2009 when the City Council pulled support to a company called Glencraft, which was a 170-year-old business, formerly the Royal Workshops for the Blind, and they pulled the funding. It was losing £1.2 million a year, so it was a financial basket case. It employed 52 people, and they liquidated it. They put them out of work on the 19th of November 2009. I'd been introduced to social enterprise through SCDI at a lunchtime tour. I met Instant Neighbour, the FOI, and was introduced to the wonderful work that these people did. It really enthused me, social enterprise being sustainable business that makes profit, but the profit's ploughed back into the company to employ more people, disadvantaged, disabled, etc., but not for profit to be distributed to shareholders. So it was very appealing. And I was climbing the West Coast with a friend, and I was talking about this social enterprise introduction I'd had. And the following week, Glencraft went into liquidation, and I got one word text from her that just said Glencraft ? So I called up the liquidator and said, look, can I come and talk to you about Glencraft and see if there's anything we can do? Kid you not, that was a Thursday. Friday morning, I'd organised to see him on the Friday afternoon, the liquidator. Friday morning, Bob pops into our open plan box that we all worked in and said, Dunk, I've been out for dinner 3 times this week. We need to do something about Glencraft. The whole city's talking about it. Can we raise some money, give them some funds or something? You know, it's wrong what's happening. It's not right. I said, well, Bob, you can come down to the liquidator with me this afternoon. So the two of us trucked down, and as was Bob's way, we talked, and I ended up taking all the paperwork home, and Bob went off to the pub. That kind of relationship. He's a wonderful leader, but the accountants usually end up doing the work. So I poured through these papers and had a bit of a light bulb moment. I spoke to some of the people, the caretaker who kept the lights on in the factory, and 1 or 2 people in the council. And it struck me that there was a fantastic opportunity because the capacity was there, the business wasn't. We had a great network, and we decided that we would try and use the oil and gas network Bob and I had, expand that, look for help, and try and increase the sales, especially offshore. And delighted that about a few days later, I put a little business plan together. By the way, we'd been to the liquidator and we said, we believe there's lots of people in town offering support. They said, no, it's just you guys. No pressure then. So I got a call about a week later. Said, will I take a call from the First Minister? And like him or loathe him, Alex Salmond, I have to say, I was really impressed with him. We were on the phone for half an hour, and he knew half the people intimately. He knew them by name. He knew the business. He'd been in, totally unheralded, behind the scenes, to see if he could do something about it. And we got a lot of support from the Scottish Government, from Social Enterprise Scotland, from the local community. And Bob and I did one-to-ones with the 52 people who had been made redundant, not one of which, well, in fact, one had got a job, Lisa Duncan, as an accountant. 51 others had not got work in 6 months, and there's very little prospect of work. So we did these one-to-ones, we gave them some hope, and we eventually reopened in April 2010. I'm delighted to say we're now 10 years in next month. The business, I think at the 9 months to December, lost £3,000. So we're financially breaking even. We're moving to a new site at in Maastricht, a new custom-built factory in 2 months' time. Some of my colleagues from Glencraft are here. They're wonderful people. It's a good story, but it's social enterprise in action. So got involved in that, and I'm now the chair of Glencraft, have been for 5 years, and don't know how I'm ever going to get out of it. But I decided that gave me a taste of giving something back and doing good in the community. I represent Children First. I'm on the board of the wonderful Robert Gordon University Foundation. Some of you will know Chuck Davis here, who's been omnipresent in Aberdeen for the last couple of years, over from the States, trying to raise funds for the Robert Gordon University Foundation, which is a charity, and it does help those who can't afford to go to university to get access. Chuck and I are very keen in developing an alumni that is more American in outlook. You go to the States, and I spent a lot of time in the States, and you go to universities there, and there's almost an unwritten obligation from alumni to give something back to the university. You'll see octogenarians trucking up to baseball matches at Texas A&M with the strips on, you know, and they give money every year back, millions and millions if they can, or tens and tens of dollars if they, whatever they can afford, they give back to the university. It's a culture that doesn't exist here. We're trying to get it started, because when you are successful, and many of you will be because you've come to a great university, you're getting a great education, you do need to appreciate that you've got this for nothing. Now, you will have racked up, if you're anything like I was as a student, a fair bit of debt from the Students' Union and the nightlife that is part of university education. And the student loans and student debt these days is pretty horrendous. But once that's all paid off, once you become successful, do remember to give something back. It's very, very important, because there's a lot of people out there who can't get the opportunities that you guys have got. Career Academies UK, it's about mentoring 5th and 6th year pupils who don't know what they want to do into either tertiary education or employment. So we organise school children to have private sector mentors. We have 200 in Aberdeen City and Shire by September being mentored. I go back to my initial picture of St Andrews. The importance of mentoring starts at that age. Maggie's cancer research, and Aberdeen FC Community Trust. I'm delighted to say I'm the chairman of that charity that kicked off about 18 months ago, and it's doing great things. And following my dream, I'm a lifelong supporter of Aberdeen Football Club. It's not charity, but I was fortunate enough to be made a main board director a couple of weeks ago, so a very exciting personal achievement for me in that respect. So, that's 4 things. The final thing I want to leave you with is to tell you a little story. I was at an SCDI forum a few years ago, and Sir Bob Geldof was speaking, and behave. Sir Bob Geldof was speaking, and it's way, I guess the Band-Aid single that came out at Christmas time for the 3rd time, you guys will be familiar with. Back in 1984, I think it was, it came out originally, and there was this great concert, Live Aid, that made tens of millions of pounds for the poor and starving in Africa. And it was a tremendous achievement for Bob Geldof and Midge Ure at that time to create that movement and start things going. And he talked a little bit about that. And he said, I've been asked an awful lot why, how it happened, how it could work, what happened. And he said he got a letter from a chap in Fife that summed it up, and it had a quotation in it. And again, the hairs in the back of my neck were rising, because he pulled from his pocket a piece of paper, and I knew what was on that piece of paper. because I carry around exactly the same piece of paper. And it's about commitment. If you don't mind, I'll read it to you. It's a quote from one of my heroes, W.H. Murray, who's a legendary, now deceased climber and environmentalist and writer. He's a Scot. And he's writing in his book, his biography, the autobiography, The Evidence of Things Not Seen. And this is him reflecting on his committing to go to the Himalayas long before Everest was climbed in 1950. And it says, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one commits oneself, then providence moves too. All kinds of things occur to help one that would not otherwise have occurred. A whole series of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favour all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. I have deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Be bold. Be bold. Set your objectives. Embrace change. And remember, if you're successful, you're lucky enough to be successful, give something back. Thank you very much for listening. Happy to take questions. Anyone's got any? Yes.
How were you able to borrow $300 million?
It's a Black American Express. We borrowed the $300 million from the Bank of Scotland. It was an instrument called, well, it was a business called Bank of Scotland Integrated Finance, who the bank put up all the money, and it was split between debt and equity, and we sold some shares to third-party investors. It's kind of frowned upon these days because the debt and equity elements coming together as one package was kind of frowned upon by bankers. And many of the companies that were backed by Bank of Scotland in the crash, in the property crash, failed. But we were a spectacular success. With the $300 million, they got $650 million back. So it was a tremendous deal. One of the investors texted me the day we closed the deal and said, "Great job, Duncan. It's the only thanks we got." So you've got to treat these financiers very, very carefully. But at that time, Bank of Scotland and Bossif had failed. It had been taken over by Lloyds. They all wanted their money back, despite the fact we were incredibly successful. But it was a recognised package. We used a local company called Simmons & Co. that were pretty well versed in finding finance for us. You surround yourselves with good people, and they'll help you out and mentor you through the process. Because needless to say, I hadn't borrowed $300 million before. But we did put up a fair bit ourselves, and we ended up with half the equity in the business, which again is unusual. Private equity deals, generally, they call it sweat equity. They'll maybe keep the management on and dish out maybe 10 or 12%, and they have to work for a little more. We ended up with 50%, which kind of got diluted down a little. It was a pretty good deal. Good question. Yes, sir.
I know throughout your journey to this item, hopefully there might be some ups and downs. Could you please share with us one of the basic and the most specific challenges you passed through, especially in terms of, like you gave a kind of example whereby you've been embraced with the price and you're able to overcome it. Like, so which one is one of the major challenges you have solved, especially when you enter encounter with the wood groups?
Good question. What was one of our major challenges?
Yes. Apart from the issue of the price.
Well, any challenges we had, we would kind of flip to the core values to give you the answer. If you're ever in doubt, we would, the core values would tell us what was right. But yeah, if things go wrong, it's how you react to things going wrong. We had an incident where, call it the Stopple incident. We're working for one of the biggest oil companies in the world down in the southern sector, and they dropped this piece of kit called a Stopple down the hole that they drill in subsea, and they had to stop production to get this thing out of the hole. And production at that time was worth $1 million a day, and one of our guys had just dropped something in the hole that was costing the client $1 million a day. The client's not happy. The client's on the phone going apeshit with our guy. And there's two things you can do. You can say, take all the phones off the hook, go home for the weekend, have a few drinks, and it will be a truck up at the client's office on Monday and expect to be thrown off the job or given huge abuse. Or you can mobilize everything that you know and some of the things you don't know to help the client. And that's what we did. We got all our contractors in, we got all our engineers around the world thinking about this problem and trying to solve it. We actually ended up with the Royal Navy using an ROV and some amazing technology to go down with a camera into the hole and with a remote drag to get the Stopple out. We got it out and everyone was happy. It cost the client $4 million. So we still had a little bit of work to do. So what we did was we wrote a letter to every single person involved in that crisis. We went into the client's office the next day and said, sign these because you owe these guys a lot of thanks. And that client could not have been happier. I've never seen anyone so happy to have lost $4 million in my own life. So again, it's how you react in a crisis. You can hide under a pillow or you can take it head on and be transparent, be honest, and get it done. Up the back there.
What's your advice on finding a mentor?
Finding a mentor, go ask. Ask them. Find somebody who you respect, admire, somebody tells you on Twitter he's good. There's very, very few occasions where a mentor will say no. And that's why Bob and I have these rules that we only have 6 at a time, because the hardest word, and you referred to the no word earlier, but when I retired from oil and gas, the hardest word I could find in my lexicon was no. I don't have time. But find somebody, and they may not work for you, so have a coffee, have a meeting. If it works, it's great. I currently mentor an Olympian, a football player, a graduate, a business colleague, somebody who's just achieved a fantastic position at the top of industry in the oil and gas industry, and a friend. So it doesn't matter who they are. One of the things I learned is how much I knew and how much I'd experienced in the 35 years that are similar problems to, people have come to me with similar problems to ones that I've faced in the past, and therefore it becomes easy. So pick your mentor, be bold, you know, go and ask Ferdinand if he'll be your mentor.
Are you mentoring people now?
I am, yes. Judith.
I don't really want everybody to hear the answer, but how do you get on the mentee waiting list?
You just ask. It's, as I say, Bob shared with me, so he only does 6, and it's great fun. It's a coffee once a month and a chat for an hour, so it's very easy to do. But you should have one, so go find these mentors. There's some fantastic people in business in Aberdeen and beyond, and they'll only be too happy to help if you ask them. But if you don't ask, you won't get.
Can I ask a supplementary, Duncan, just out
Certainly,
of interest?
Rita.
How early did you have what you would characterise as a mentor? Like while you were a student still? Was it later in
No,
your career?
I probably didn't have mentors other than my parents, who just, as I say, taught me good habits. And it's amazing how much your parents know, but I guess if you're anything like me as a student, you thought you knew far more than your parents, and you've got all the technology that tells you you do. We had all the technology when we were students as well, albeit, I don't know where the heavy laptop is, but it's a bit bigger. So I didn't really have formal mentoring until much later in my career, but it is absolutely, it also opens doors. The network that some of these people have got can really help you in establishing relationships and opportunities. Yes?
Do you see any difference in importance between the formal mentoring and informal one?
Yes, there can be. I mean, I used to set objectives with my staff, aligned with strategy and aligned with company goals and objectives and the annual plan. But I would also insist on, or try and get my staff to have personal development as part of their goals and goal setting for the year. And some of that can get quite personal. So if people want to have that kind of broader mentoring, that's fine. You know, we can talk about that. Not that you're an expert in it, but you can have different conversations. Yeah.
But can you say like the formal mentoring is more important, more valuable for the business?
Yeah, I would say it's useful in solving problems, and it's useful. Some people aren't very good managers. I've got one or two situations where I've had to help out and intervene with a particular manager who probably hasn't been up to managing, and mentoring can kind of help work around that to everyone's satisfaction, and actually give the person who's not a very good manager some much needed guidance as well. Yes?
I actually have two questions, and first of them is, when you started your journey, did you know where you're going to be, like after this 35 years?
No.
So
as that.
you said to set us objectives, so how will you set them if you don't know where?
Well, I remember saying to my mother that I wanted to be filthy rich, and but no, I always wanted to work in the oil and gas industry. I very quickly developed a penchant for finance, and then it's just a case of I wanted to be the best I possibly could be and move ahead. Did I think we would do a buyout and have the journey that we did? Not at the time, but I certainly equipped myself to be able to do something like that at the time. My objectives were probably 5 years at a time, and I generally look forward 5 years, and then come back and really crystallise the 12-year personal plans that I have.
And another question, you said a lot of partners you had, most of them were men, kind of. So does women have the same opportunities actually to succeed?
Of course they do. It's a real problem, especially in the oil and gas industry. I remember presenting to our engineers. We had 1,500 engineers in PSN. I presented to the engineering leadership team one morning, and the only girl in the room said, "We're not very diverse." And I said, "Well, there's 25 of you in the room, and there's you as the only woman. Why is that? Help me with it." I wish it was 50-50, because there's no doubt on a board, if you're working in a board that is male only, the behaviour is very different to if there's a woman in the room. Very sad fact, but it is. Behaviour is much better you get more business done, and I happen to think some of the best people I've worked with in industry throughout my career have been women. But it is a big struggle, and I'm glad to say that there's women on several women on the Wood Group non-executive board, and I just encourage it. There's a lot of women here. I hope you all go on to fantastic careers. Yes, sir.
You talked about change. How do you manage and prepare for change, though?
Embrace it. Just look forward to it. I mean, there's a change curve where some people get on straight away and rise up and just take change as just a habit, daily life. Everyone faces change. Absolutely everyone. You're the Twitter generation. You will laugh at Twitter and Facebook when you're my age. It'll be absolutely so outdated, it'll be unbelievable. What will be replacing it? Probably the robot in the corner will be talking to you and be your personal assistant. Who knows? But just use it. Appreciate that it goes on all the time, rather than saying we'll never change that, or this is the way we've always done it, or you can't do that. Don't do it. Be bold.
And
Yes.
I think maybe just one more question, because we need to head to lunch.
Do you think that, do you think that before you started PSN and you were faced with job loss or unemployment, do you think you still could have gone through with starting the company, or would you have continued looking for other jobs?
We were very lucky in PSN that we operated in an area where, as I mentioned, we grew the business 25% year on year during the financial crisis. And that's because we worked in an area where we were looking after existing assets that still pump oil regardless of the price. So we were pretty well protected from that, and that's the area I've worked in all my life. You're talking about drillers and rig owners and vessel owners, and I guess people like Ian's business, where people aren't going to be spending huge amounts of money in a new SAP system in next month, because these things kind of fall off. So does charity. Charitable donations fall off. We were very, very lucky in PSN, and there is a lot of luck involved in whatever you do. If I had £1 for everyone that said to me, I thought about doing that buyout that you guys did, I'd be able to give a lot more to charity than I have done. People think about these things, but they don't actually do them. But we were lucky, and there's no doubt. Okay, thank you very much.
It just remains to me, as Dean of Aberdeen Business School, to round up, say a few thanks to individuals, and then to send you on your way to the lunch, and the caterers will be waiting expectantly to do that. I'd just like to go back to what Heather said right at the very start. This is the 50th anniversary of Aberdeen Business School this year, which is a fabulous anniversary to celebrate. And I think it's incredibly good, fabulous that we have Duncan here as a student from a number of years ago, who has been a student of Aberdeen Business School and is able to come back and talk to us about the incredible journey his career has been since that time. It's also, I think, a great story alongside Ian's of the challenges, the unexpected things that can happen to you in the journey of life, post-student life, post-graduation, some of the routes that you take that you might not have envisaged. And listening to both Ian and Duncan talk, what kind of ran out for me about both of your values and what you had to say was a sense of personal integrity and personal values that you felt you brought into your business life, that speak to the authenticity of the individual being important in the way that they actually characterise those values, something about boldness and actually resilience, and being able to be resilient in the face of difficult times as well as the good times, because actually from your experience, sometimes it is in those hard times that the opportunities are most exciting, the things that are presented to you are exciting, and it's good not to have a closed mind to those, but equally to know when to say no. Lots of good messages in there. So, a number of people to thank. I'd like to thank all of you for coming along today and being a fabulous audience and having so many questions. I'd like to thank Absoft for their continuing support of this event, and colleagues Ashley Wood and others from Absoft who've been preparing and organising in the weeks and months running up to today. I'd like to thank RGU staff who've supported our technical staff, marketing and catering who are about to provide our lunch. And I'd like to thank Heather and colleagues from the Centre for Entrepreneurship and across Aberdeen Business School for supporting the event today as well. We do envisage having a number of events over the course of this year that will help us to celebrate our 50th anniversary. We're intent upon celebrating Aberdeen Business School and the achievements of the school and of its graduates and its students, and really making sure that we take every opportunity to send positive messages, I guess, in a time of challenge and difficulty economically is not a bad thing to be doing. Finally, just to thank individually our two speakers today, and I have a small gift for each, which I will present, which will in no way challenge your moral integrity in accepting. I'm absolutely sure. That's for Duncan, and for you, Duncan, a small gift and a certificate of our appreciation for coming and speaking at the event today. And for Ian, for how many years now? Many years of fabulous support. We thank you again.